Hi, everybody. Welcome to Lurking for Legends. We are a live video cast that speaks to people from all walks of the publishing world. My co-hosts, Christie Stratos, David M. Kelly, and myself, encourage viewers to chime in with questions for our guests or simply comment on what you hear on the show. And two bits of housekeeping before we get started. David sends his regrets. He cannot be here tonight. Something's come up and he has to deal with it. And secondly, the big news is I want to welcome back the original co-host of Lurking for Legends, Christie Stratos. Welcome back to our show. Our viewers have really missed you.
I'm so excited to finally be back. And I just want to say real quick, thank you to everyone who sent me such nice messages and was so supportive of me all this time. And actually everyone on the screen right now did that as well. So it really made a big difference to me. And thank you. So I'm super excited to be back. I've missed it terribly. So thanks for having me back.
No, that's awesome. The show hasn't been the same without you, so we really love having you back with us. So, and tonight on Looking for Legends, we're excited to also welcome back speculative fiction and supernatural suspense author Jessa Forest. Welcome, Jessa.
Hello, hello. Lovely to be back and see you both.
Now, am I mistaken by saying when you did this the first time, it was your very first interview?
Yes, it was. It was. And I was very, very nervous.
That's
So
awesome.
a little more
You
mellow
did
this
very
time.
well. I remember you
Thank
did very well. So we wouldn't have known that it was your
thank
first
you.
interview. I just recall going through my notes that that's one thing I saw. But before we get started, for those who don't know you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Jessa Forest. Please call me Jess. I'm an aspiring lab tech who writes creepy, gory stories to stay sane, and write poetry and grimdark adventures that lean more towards contemporary than epic fantasy. But I actually am trying my hand at epic fantasy right now. So, and they're at turns lighthearted and visceral, very gory, like I said, but I try to like keep it, realistic. I like to create my own Lovecraftian and eldritch gods and set them in modern times.
Nice. There's just so much exciting there already, honestly.
Yeah.
I guess like the first thing that I would definitely ask, and I think I can't remember if we talked about this last time, hopefully not. But in the beginning, you said how you are like currently, getting a degree and you write some bloody, gory stuff. And it sounds like the two may or may not go hand in hand. Does your, potential, the degree that you're working on actually play into your fiction at all?
It actually does, but not really in like the kind of like the physical like anatomy body kind of stuff like that I get more from my phlebotomy experience with like blood. I mean, not that I was a bad phlebotomist and there was blood on the floor or nothing, but like that's my experience with blood. But for my degree in laboratory science, I actually get
Mhm.
a lot of inspiration for my monsters from bacteria and
Mm.
parasites and like other diseases and conditions that we test for in the lab. So that's actually
Mm.
been a surprising benefit.
Yeah. That's really cool. Some of your research is not only kind of pre-done, but then you're maybe gleaning
Mhm.
some ideas from that. So it's sort of serving two purposes. I think that's really cool.
Exactly.
Yeah, it certainly is. Christie's very big on research. I love seeing Christie's posts every week about all the neat things she uncovers about the Victorian stuff. I think we just saw a picture of you and an old typewriter today, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you, Jess, you're a poet as well, and
Mhm.
did, does your poetry actually make it into your stories per se, into just your regular books? Do you include them as maybe lyrics to a song that someone might be singing, or just poems at the beginning of a chapter?
Yeah, one of my former creative writing professors said, because I was in her class for poetry, and she actually said, you need to put a line from every poem in your fiction as like dialogue or narration, and you need to put a line from your fiction into your poetry. So I kind of do that, and it's like a fun little inside joke for me to say like, oh, that was in my poem, and like I read it, I see it and I read it. But I do. I'm not very musically talented, and I'm not good at the rhyme or meter, like the iambic pentameter stuff. So I don't really feel like comfortable with making like official lyrics per se, but I have put a couple of pieces that I've made specifically for projects that I've been working on into like as maybe they're drinking songs, because drinking songs you don't you don't have to be rhythmic for those.
That would be cool. I like to stick them. Actually, I've done that in one of my books. I used it as a song that they sang to the hero of my story, and it wasn't a very good song. So when the bar broke out, he knew he was in trouble. But it's so fun to put them in there. So you kind of use them as Easter eggs, is what they call them, or people can find them. Do people actually search for them, or do they even know they're there?
No, I'm not that. It's not that well known. It's mainly just for me as a kind of like way to weave things together that I'm working on, is like a little, makes me remember the teacher in those classes and how fun everything was. But yeah, it doesn't really have anything to do with
Not yet.
Not yet. I'm not.
No.
Yeah.
Not yet.
But going forward, you look back another 5, 10, 15 years, and you start picking up a readership, and it'll be amazing what they will dig out. And they will really probably become almost cultish the way they're going to start combing through your stuff and say, oh, I found this and I found that. And it'd be really cool to see how that evolves for you.
That would be very cool. Please do that. Read all my poetry and do that, please.
I know, as a reader, I love Easter eggs too. Even if I know to look for something, I'll be reading even closer. So I just think that's a really clever and fun thing to do. But obviously, it's going to add like a different flavor to each type of writing that you're doing, which is also really cool. It's like a different kind of strategy in a way. It's pretty cool.
It's a fun way to engage a reader for sure. It gives them, as they start discovering this, they're going to really enjoy going through books and trying to find them. And it'll be something to talk about, especially on social media channels and stuff like that. And so it's just Anita Stewart says she writes poetry too, and meter gives her a headache. So
yeah, I feel that. I do. Can't do it.
So what are you working on now?
So now I'm actually working on about 4 or 5 different things, actually. In the forefront of my to-do list is my series, The Slaughter Chronicles, which is a grimdark contemporary fantasy of novels and short fiction about a world where humans don't believe in monsters. They don't know monsters are real, but they very much are, and they eat people on a regular basis. And the story follows a werewolf and void hunter, which is all the monsters come from the void. So like void hunter, Regina Slaughter, my main character. And I'm currently working on the...
Sorry to interrupt. What's her name?
Regina Slaughter.
Slaughter.
Yes.
Nice.
Deliberate.
Yes. And it is deliberate, and it's actually a family name. Regina was a great aunt on my father's side, and Slaughter was the last name of my great grandmother. It was her maiden name.
That's cool.
So
more Easter eggs. Easter eggs.
Exactly. Exactly.
No, that's awesome. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you there. I just
no, you're good. You're good. So I'm working on that, and I'm also working on the first novel for that, and also 2 short stories for that, because I originally had when I was on last time, I was sharing my short story collection that was sort of like a bunch of vignettes, like stories that you could string together, and it had like the same central characters, and like it read like a novel, but it was broken up in this experimental way that I was trying to do. And for that was meant to be sort of an aside or like an addition to the series, but not necessarily a prequel, not necessarily a book 0, just like something to have extra, like a supplement. But as a year's gone by, or more than a year, I don't know what time is, as time has gone by, I've either it's a good thing or a bad thing, but the stories that I wrote are tying more into the events of the main timeline of the novels. So I'm actually doing a bit of rebranding with my series, and I'm trying to connect everything all together and actually make a prequel that is character based instead of like timeline based. So then that way I can have like sort of multiple prequels like coming down the line. Like, so there's like Regina's book, and then it could be like her dad's book, and then like her brother's book, and so I give myself a little bit of freedom for that. So that's mainly what I'm working on.
That's a lot, and it's so exciting too. I think it's really exciting, especially, as a reader, when I hear an author is taking this world and like building it and building it, and there's more than just the main series to look forward to as well. There's all these additional things. It's really exciting, and there's like in between shorter things to read, which is always just welcome and enjoyable. So I think that's really cool. And you did mention author rebranding, which we all know is like a forever hot topic. It's something that every author, well, most authors end up doing at some point. Yeah. Everyone at some point, really. I mean, in one way or another, whether it's sort of, fixing the, what do you call it? Like your logo or anything like that, or your website, or, the appearance of your books, tying them together. There's like a million different ways that authors rebrand, and it's done a lot. So, since you are currently, in the middle of that process, what made you want to do that? And like, what are you doing? Why do you think it's going to be better now?
Sure. So this might be a bit of a long story, so I'm going to try to like condense it and keep it concise. So with the Slaughter Chronicles, I do not write linearly at all. And I actually have about 15 books in the series roughly outlined and planned out. And depending on whenever I sit down at my desk, whatever comes out is what I write that day, which doesn't make getting books finished, any easier because I don't have a schedule. But that means that like one day I could be working on book 5, another day I could be working on book 14. Like I don't know where my brain is going to take me, and that's really fun. But that process has actually inspired this particular rebranding, because things that I'm writing for the much later books and what I call like the second part of the series, which I call like season 2, because it's like completely separate. And my main character goes through a lot of changes, like emotional changes and like supernatural issues, and I can take those and weave them into the drafts that I'm working on. So like not only do I get to like keep things consistent, but I can refer back and forth. But because of that, I really wanted to make sure that what I was working on, what I was publishing and working on, matched what my intentions are for the future. And like I said earlier, like the short story collection that I released last year, Pulling Teeth and Other Stories, that was meant to be just sort of an aside and not connected. But now I'm actually going to connect that to the main series. And so I've got a new cover. I actually do have a new logo as well. Because I want to do other genres in the dark fantasy and sci-fi genre, not just like this one series. So I made my logo a little bit more versatile for that. And so yeah, new covers, new logo. In the second edition of Pulling Teeth that I will be releasing over the summer, it has a brand new title, and it is going to have 2 new short stories. So nothing's going to change in the original content per se. I mean, I might clean up, some purple prose that I may or may not should have like indulged in, like what I thought that was so cool. So new title, new logo, new covers, and just adding on.
That's awesome. And branding especially as an independent author is so important. And I know myself as a book collector, and a lot of people I've spoken to, is they like when they see all the same kind of spines on their bookshelves. So they all look the same, and they have the same little logo on them. So they just look like a nice set. Or you see the traditionally published authors, they have so many print runs by so many different presses that some are 9-inch high books and some are 8.5-inch high books, and depending on when you buy your books and where you buy them, you're not buying the same print run. And then when you get them home and you put them on your bookshelf, they just don't look as pretty on the shelf. It doesn't change what's in between the covers, but people are certainly looking for stuff like that, and it also identifies who you are. And I think it's very important as especially independent authors, and it's something that we learn as we go. Like at first, I was buying pre-made covers all the time, and none of them matched. As pretty as each one was, they were great on their own as a standalone. They really weren't great for a series. And you slowly learn that maybe that's not quite the way to go. So maybe get the first pre-made and then have the same artist do the rest of them, and kind of brand them together that way. You were mentioning that you work sometimes on book 14, book 5. Is this a subconscious effort to? Are you going to suddenly just stockpile them all and then rapid release them? Is this a strategy involved here?
No. If I did that, it would probably be like 10 years before I actually released anything, which is why I put the short story collection out when I did, even though I didn't have the manuscript for book 1 finished, was because I had like 5 stories that were just sitting there not doing anything. And I think if I had a shorter series, like maybe between 3 and 5 books, that would be something that I would be interested in attempting in the future, just to sort of see like what are the market trends, and like what's the sales stuff going, all like the statistical stuff behind that, but not for the Slaughter Chronicles, no.
Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Amber says, "Welcome back, Christie. Love that necklace. It's so unique."
Guess what, Amber? Actually, Jess is wearing cameo earrings. How cool is that?
I'm gonna try to you can kind of see where there we go.
They never gave me the memo. Those two are in cahoots, and they wore cameo stuff. I didn't get to wear my cameo stuff, so I felt left out.
We are. It's okay.
So I want to jump into something kind of specific about your work. We have the first book will be coming out, I'm not sure if we have like an official date, but I know that, you've been making some amazing changes to it and doing, some fixing on it and getting ready for publication whenever you're ready. But, I've had the pleasure of getting to read it. So I did want to bring up The Void, which is just such a cool place. It's such a cool place. And because, we get a lot of so many fantasy authors and just people who enjoy fantastical worlds, I think yours is really different and unique, and especially what it's on, and I'll leave it at that. And so I just thought maybe you could tell us a little bit about it, because it's so much fun. And it's, some of what you have in your book is like, there are, you kind of you have humans shifting into wolves, and there's vampires and stuff, but actually there's a lot of totally unique stuff about all of them. So, the Void is something I thought would be really cool to hear a little bit about.
Sure, absolutely. It's one of my favorite places that I dreamed up. It was actually inspired by I guess it's old now, the video game Spore. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that, but it's the one where you start off and you're like this little organism, this little creature, and you have to eat things and evolve, and you get bigger and bigger, and then you're in the water, and then you go out on the land, and it's probably way before anybody's time. But I was really trying to hammer in supernatural as realistic as I could make it. And one of my taglines that I'm actually experimenting with is I combine left brain science with right brain inspiration. I wanted to figure out what could be at least somewhat plausible to the laws of physics that we have, and while still keeping it really unique to me, and that kind of fantastical element to it. So The Void is the best way I can describe it is a completely separate universe underneath or beside or kind of behind our own. So it's sort of if you take a step to the left and where, and you're there. But it's its own contained is the universe really contained? I don't, it's a space, and instead of outer space, we have space, there are these shadows, and the shadows sort of make up the environment. And within this environment, there are massive planet-sized creatures. And so there are also smaller creatures that like chase the bigger creatures, and sometimes they get eaten, sometimes they eat them, and it's like this, you know, kind of like the ocean, but like not water. And these stories take place on one of those creatures, and people, you know, through various different kinds of means, can travel to the void. And so sometimes there are humans on these creatures, sometimes there aren't. You know, sometimes they're very the environment on, like, on top of the larger creatures' backs, or wherever, you know, wherever people like appear when they transfer from this world to the void. If that's like a hospitable environment, then they can, the people can live there. But if it's not, you know, sometimes people have a harder time. So that sort of helps shape like the civilizations that get built on these creatures. And why they have atmosphere, plot armor, because I want them to. So that is not, you know, realistic at all. And I have thought about that, but I haven't like come up with a good way to just justify it scientifically. So it's just there. There's oxygen there. There's clouds. Like the shadows make that, keep the oxygen in. It's there. Whatever. So one of the the principal place in the void where Regina and the other monster hunters go and, you know, shift back and forth from is it's a snail-like creature that I have named Darkholme, because the shells are inside the shell. There's no light, so like Darkholme is its, you know, because the home is the shell. Sorry if that's like totally random, but
that's good.
in constructing the this world, I focused on what kind of people would have come there and how their culture, their language would have evolved, being in the, you know, what they would bring from like where they lived on Earth versus like what they encounter. And I've got different kinds of not just like new, like, you know, I want to say flora, the normal flora and fauna, you know, like squirrels, but, you know, not squirrels, you know, that kind of thing. But I also have in the void places, the originators of what we on Earth know of as werewolves and vampires. And that sort of crosses into when I was making these characters who, you know, could shift into different bodies and or become different things. And there's a lot of mythology and folklore surrounding like werewolves and vampires and different kinds of shifters. And I wanted to make sure that I was being very respectful of those stories, while also like kind of testing like what I could do, what I could bring to it that was something new. And one of the things that I haven't encountered much as is the origin of the, you know, whether it's a curse or bloodline or as a separate species. Like you always have like, there's one person, you know, with the vampires, there's one, you know, first vampire, or like, you know, if you watch like, you know, any other movie like Underworld, Dracula, you know, all that. And so I wanted to say, well, what if that was a species, and what would that species be like? So I've got swarmers for the vampires that are like, they're like big mosquitoes with kind of snake bodies and kind of fleshy dragonfly wings. And they're like as big as buses, and they're cool. They like to swarm, and they, you know, they fly and drink blood. And then the werewolves, the original species, is actually something that I'm keeping a little bit of a mystery, because it's not really a big reveal, but it's something that nobody's ever seen it. That's sort of the situation in like book one. Nobody really knows what it is. Nobody knows where werewolves really come from. They're there on Darkholme. They're in other places in the void, people are sure, but that no one's ever seen like the original like swarmer version of a werewolf. But Regina is like, let's see if I can say this succinctly, like her version of werewolf, like what I call a strain, is there's, you know, like you can have bloodlines, or, you know, like how her lineage, her werewolf lineage is from one of the original werewolf creatures. And a big sort of subplot to her stories and through the novels is her finding out more about that lineage and what she can do as a supernatural creature, and what sort of conflicts come out of that. You know, because, you know, everybody, you know, you if there's power, people want to take it. So, you know, there's issues in that, and also about identity, like what is she in the grand cosmic scheme of the universe? Because I didn't want to make a main character who was like the hero or the sort of the savior archetype. I wanted to really play with what's just an average person who's, you know, hasn't really had any luck in life, and how to just like really ruin their day. So I feel like that's sort of what grimdark is all about. It's not just about like battles and like, you know, icky stuff and like being in the mud. It's like your characters aren't having a good time, and it's like what they do to get through that bad time that makes the story, in my opinion. That's what grimdark means to me. So so yeah, I hope I didn't just like totally confuse everybody with explaining all that.
I think it's great, and I think we've learned how rich and involved your series is, and I want to touch on that in a second. I just want to let the viewers know that please feel free to, if you have questions for Jessa or Christie and I, feel free to put them in there. That's part of the show, so you're always invited to ask or any of the panelists any questions you like. But so speaking of all how complicated that sounds, how do you keep track of all this? Like you must have like you've cornered the market on sticky notes, or like how do you keep track of everything?
I actually, after years of trial and error, I have come up with a system that works for me, and it's basically, I have a massive spreadsheet, but it's not organized like normal spreadsheets are.
The spreadsheet's done on what, Excel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Excel numbers for Mac users. I'm trying to get everything onto Google Sheets because like I write in Google Docs and I use Google Drive for a lot of storage stuff. So I'm trying to I want to streamline, get everything on the same platform, but I use, for Excel. And I try to use it as a more of a concordance than an actual like sort of data gathering situation like with Excel, because I don't know how Excel works. So I type in a term, I've got a term and then the definition. And the definition could be just like, this is what the word werewolf means on Darkholme. Like this is the Darkholme word for werewolf. Or I have like a character name and then I write out everything that I know at that time about what that character is doing. So Regina's is very, very long, spanning multiple columns, and some of them are just sort of waiting to develop. And that's the only way I can keep it straight. And some of it I don't always keep it straight. And I'm very fortunate to have a husband who likes this series just as much as I do, and he helps me remember things when I get them wrong.
Yeah, it's so important to have readers that pre-read your stuff before it goes out there, because it's amazing what they can retain that you don't as the author. It seems like a strange thing that the author doesn't know the characters as well as the reader, but it's not that you don't know your characters, but you're writing that book over a long period of time, and the reader's reading it over a very short period of time, so they retain that. And Christie, you're the editor, is that not correct?
Yes.
So as the editor, then I need to ask you, with Jessa's, like, I think that my worlds are involved, but they don't hold a candle to what I heard you explain with your void and everything else. I go, wow. So how is it as an editor? How do you keep track?
Well, it's a great question. Yeah. So one of the things I do is for each novel, and then I'll keep like an Excel sheet, and or rather an Excel document, and then I have a sheet per book. And on that sheet, I create a book map per book. So I'll have all of the actions that everyone is doing, all the main plot points, any fine details are also in there, and then that way I have what happened in each book, but it's not in some like really long document. It's an Excel sheet. And like I said, it can be like the main story, and it should be by perspective. And then the fine details as well. And that way, if I get to the second book and I'm like, I think we mentioned this in the first one, but I can't remember, I can just search the word and it's going to be there, So I do that. And then, Jess has mentioned she has a concordance and similar things that she uses. She sends that to me and I'm able to use it and update it if I need to, which, if you do a Google Sheet, obviously we'll both have access to it. So that'll work out really well.
I will get on that.
Yeah, you get a lot of pressure as an editor to pick these things out because Jess is counting on you as the editor to find these things, and so there's a lot of pressure on you to try and keep track of everything that's going on in Jess's world. Because you're not just involved in Jess's world, you're involved in your own world and everyone else that you're editing too. So there'd be a lot of pressure on an editor to look after something that huge. So good for both of you.
Now I feel bad.
No, I don't. I'm not trying to make you feel bad at all. I think it's awesome how involved your series is, and you're going 14 books. So hopefully it's very involved. Otherwise, it's going to get boring real quick, right? So by being involved, the reader's always invested in what's going on now, what's going on over here. So no, I think that's great.
And, if you ever, or anybody out there ever feels bad for their editor in that way, just think about Brandon Sanderson's Stormlight Archives, which are like, they max out a paperback that is like as big as you can make them. And he has a consistency editor. Like they don't even have to copy edit. They don't have to do anything else. They just have to make sure it's all consistent because they're enormous, these books and the plot lines and the storylines. So, I mean, that's kind of like what I'm doing, but obviously not for like 1,500 page books. So, just remember that exists. So.
Very true. Very true. Now I don't feel as bad. That's good.
Not at all. Not at all. It's kind of part of the fun actually for me, because like if you're going to be an editor, you have to be interested in the details, and getting them right and keeping them straight and all that. So, for me, this is just part of the job. This is just what I do. So no big deal.
And it's so important to have a good relationship with the editor for sure, because you guys both have to understand each other. Otherwise, the relationship doesn't work. So that's good to hear that you guys are doing that.
And she's an amazing editor.
Thank you. Yeah, we're editors and friends. So, I mean, we have a lot of fun with it at the same time.
And she does not pull her punches, and she'll find things that like I wouldn't have even thought about. And like, she's like, no, like, or this is really good. Or like, no. And I'm like, yeah, okay, you're right. Like, I'm going to try to make it work. And then, oh yeah, you're right. Which is how one of the new short stories for the Pulling Teeth reboot actually got made, because it was the beginning of the first novel, and I got multiple people giving me feedback saying like, this is cool, but what's the point of it? Like, I don't know.
So I'm like, the rest of the book,
yeah. So I'm like, okay.
Thanks, Anita.
We're just trying to drum up new business for you there, Christie.
Yeah. I appreciate it.
So, Jessa, I know this is one of the things you wanted to touch on if we could get around to it. And you're welcome questions about how you turn campaign-style D&D-esque stories into prose. So are they... So imagine you play D&D, Dungeons & Dragons, or whatever. Like I play Pathfinders, which is pretty well Dungeons & Dragons, except a different book. But so do these campaigns that you're playing make it into your stories, or do you make your stories similar to a D&D campaign, if that makes any sense?
It does, and I actually do, and I can sort of segue away from the Slaughter Chronicles and talk about this high fantasy book that I'm writing. Is actually based on a D&D campaign that my husband plays with his coworkers. And one day, just out of the blue, he was like, hey, I need an elf princess. And I'm like, well, let me tell you. Okay, she's a necromancer and she wants to get married, and her husband got kidnapped. And she like is devastated that she can't get married. And he's like, okay, I could work with that. So, and I was like, I really want to write that. I really want, because you have all these fantasy stories about, well, like the princess is running away from the marriage. So I kind of wanted to flip it, but also make it more about you know everybody having agency. But for back to that campaign, I definitely use what people tell me what happened in their campaigns, or like when I play D&D, I sort of like try to take notes and pay attention, but I always end up having to just use that as a very bare bones base of inspiration, because if I try to write out like scene by scene, like copy, like what is everybody saying, and like make that as actual dialogue, like it won't always sometimes translate well into written narrative or make sense. So that is kind of difficult, and it also is sometimes a shame, because there's an aspect of a character that like I will really love, but I know it's like a blatant copy of like one of Brandon Sanderson's characters, or like a George R.R. Martin character, and I'm like, I cannot do that. I cannot do that.
So conversely, then, when you're playing these campaigns and you create your own characters, do you create characters that come from your stories? Because that's what I do. My characters are directly like the storyline, their background, everything. I pull right out of my books, and then I throw them into this campaign. And most of the people I play with have never read my stuff, so they have no idea about them. But the dungeon master's read it, and he knows exactly where my character is coming from. So it gives us kind of an intimate bond, and it really advances the storyline. Do you do the same?
I actually I haven't really played D&D in a couple years, so for my new stuff I haven't, but I have done that because Regina has been with me for a long time, since high school. I've had her as a character in the back of my head, so she has in various she's been she's been like a half orc barbarian at one point. She was a dwarven bard at one point. Like so I kind of keep like giving her, I keep giving her these reincarnations. But I always find like I'll make an original character for D&D, and then I'll build their backstory, and then from their backstory I get inspiration for a novel.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's funny because you were mentioning that sometimes you'll realize that the character you've created is already in existence or a copy of something. And it's so funny that you say that, because sometimes in my first drafts when I'm writing, I'll write something that's completely unoriginal, and it's totally from the Matrix or something, and it's just a first draft, so I just keep writing, and then by the time I get to the end of the story I figure out what it really should have been, and it's totally different. And I don't know if you have that experience as well with characters, like you kind of, or plot points or anything like that, where you kind of have something, it exists, and then you're able to kind of either twist it, or it's just sort of the jumping off point. Like it's okay, we all kind of keep in our minds the things that we've read, of course, and it sometimes comes out, but that doesn't mean it's the final product, right? So I don't know if you have experienced that.
I have, and I've actually, one of the reasons why it's taken me so long to finish the first book of the Slaughter Chronicles was because I would do that for like my first drafts. I would write something unoriginal, or I would have like the same character in like all three stories of mine, like different projects, but it's the same character. And I'm like, I can't write all these three because they're like the same. I would beat my head against the wall trying to fix it, instead of just telling the story and writing it out and getting it out on the page and then fixing it later. So now I'm a lot better at doing that, and just like say, it's okay. Like if this, yes, I know this is from X, Y, or Z, but yeah, we're just gonna go with it. Just like get it down. Like, you can change it later. That's my writing mantra is you can change it later. You can change it later. So yeah, I feel that.
It's sometimes funny because it's like your subconscious kind of needs you to do that in order to just move forward. And if you pause, too long on it, like you were saying, you end up redoing and working on it. It's like the rest of the story can't come out, and it just never works out. And so we've definitely had the same experience. It's weird, but it works. It works though.
Yeah, it does. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
I really want to finish a book.
Speaking about that, so you're writing in different genres. What are the complications that you experience when you're writing different genres? Do you find you sometimes mistakenly mix one with the other, or I'm not sure what I'm trying to get at here, but I just write the one genre, so it's easy for me to get into character per se. But when you're writing different genres, you almost need a different mindset.
Mm-hmm. I do, and I understand exactly what you're trying to say, and I actually don't encounter that problem as much in terms of like what the genre actually is, because I always end up blending genres together anyway. Like if it's like, you know, there's a fantasy, but I want there to be romance. So like, you know, sometimes it's heavier on the romance when I'm drafting one day, but then other days it's like, it's more in the fantasy. But if I'm trying to write something like, because the Slaughter Chronicles is very dark, and when I'm trying to write something that's lighter or more somber, but in a different way, that's where I get kind of tripped up, because there, you know, there's only so many ways that you can describe like, you know, a stab wound. And like, I have my own writing style when it comes to fight scenes, and it's hard to like say, okay, well, this is the way I write fight scenes for Slaughter Chronicles. I need to figure out something different for like my elf book, because like they're, you know, it's different characters, it's a different, you know, completely different like world, so they would, you know, do things differently. And that I find difficult, because it's, you know, and it's sort of like, then you're like, well, I'll just keep it the same, and like, but your brain figures out little tricks to work around it. And I find like details like with fight scenes, like, you know, the weaponry is going to be different, so focus on the weaponry instead of like you know, like like what the character is actually doing physically, like the blocking. So instead of the blocking, focus on the weapon, and then you get a good scene, and it does have that tone that's consistent with the genre that you're working in. So that's how I do that. But yeah, it's sometimes it's difficult, but I also use genre hopping as a way, like whenever I get bogged down with a project, especially I do this when I come up on deadline, and I really, really, really shouldn't, but it's just my brain needs a break, so I can go to something else and like dump all of like the crud that's clogging up, you know, stuff for the project I'm supposed to be working on, get all that out of my head, and then a couple of days later I can go back and the writing goes faster, because I've like been able to kind of palate cleanse, if you will.
Definitely.
So these deadlines, is that when your editor is browbeating you to get your manuscript to her so she can get it done?
Oh God. No, Christie does not. I browbeat myself. And the last deadline that I had with her for the Slaughter Chronicles, I felt so bad, because like 6 hours before I was supposed to email it, I figured out a different direction I could take the plot. And nice. I was like, this works. Oh God, I have to write 30,000 words to make this work. Like, what have I done? But I'm like, I don't want to, you know, send like her a manuscript that I'm just going to chuck, because that's a waste of her time and my money. So I was like, yes. There's going to be gaps in this one again. But it actually worked out for the best, because I ended up splitting that book in two. So I'm hoping to publish actually 2 Slaughter Chronicles novels this year, because I have both of them, you know, kind of almost finished. So sometimes those things can work out, but other times it's like, yeah, down to the wire, like minutes.
Yeah.
With that, I think we've pretty well reached the time limit today, and we welcome you. We're so happy to have you back. Sorry, this is why I like Christie normally look after the intro and everything else. She's so much smoother for these things. But thank you for joining us again, Jessa. We appreciate having you on, and we didn't run out of stuff to talk about. There's 2 episodes you've been on now, and we're certainly welcoming you back. When you have another book release or something, you want to come back and talk to us, please do reach out to. Well, you're talking to Christie all the time. Just reach out, and you're welcome back at any time.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here, and I always love talking to you both. It's a real pleasure, really. Thank you.
Yeah, no, the pleasure's all ours. And so, quickly, where can we find your books?
Okay, so right now, everything that I've published is on Amazon. I have, going wide as a dream at some point, but right now I have I have obstacles, so not wide yet. Hope to be in the future. And I've recently started a Ko-fi page where I've been posting like smaller snippets of like flash fiction and like excerpts from chapters that like haven't made it into the book, but I still want to share. So you can find that stuff there, and everything, links to everything is on my website, jessaforest.com. So spelled just like that. And that's where you can find all the links to my stuff.
Awesome. And when do we expect your next book out? Do you have a date for it yet?
I do not, and that's another. I don't do pre-orders anymore because they stress me out too much.
Yes, I feel your pain, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I'm hoping to. It'll be towards the end of summer. I'll definitely have the Pulling Teeth reboot out, and then depending on when my wonderful editor can pencil me in, when I can have the next novel to her, and then that will come out shortly after. So
this is all on Christie then.
Oh no.
Right. So we'll just put on Christie.
Uh-oh.
So that's wonderful, Jessa. Thank you for that. And Christie, I think our viewers need to catch up on what's going on with the Christie Stratosphere.
All right. Well, yeah, I did finish Grimoire Society of Dark Acts. So if you have been reading it or if you haven't yet, it is on Kindle Vella. That is just on Amazon. It's just a serial way of reading on Amazon. And you can use that on your phone. You can use it on your desktop. And it's just an easy way to read, kind of like chapter by chapter. My chapters are longer because it's fantasy. It's Victorian dark fantasy, in case you don't know much about it. But you can also join my Patreon for just $1 a month, and you can get access to all of the episodes right now, and you can just binge read the whole thing right through and not have to buy tokens or anything like that.
Binge watching Netflix.
Yeah. So that is completely done. The next step with that will be making it a paperback, and it is definitely going to be a series. So I'm excited about that. And I also have been working with a cover designer for my Nanopunk book 1 in the series. So I should be able to share that relatively soon. And at that point, I will reveal who the cover designer is.
Ooh.
Very exciting. And again, that's going to be another series. So some really cool stuff going on. I'm hoping that I will get Nanopunk book 1 out this year, and then also the paperback of Grimoire book 1. And hopefully I'll be writing Grimoire book 2 serial format again. I haven't really planned the month that I'm going to start that back up, but I have started it on my own to make sure I'm all set with it before I start putting it up for everyone to read. So a lot to look forward to, a lot going on. And I'm really excited, actually. It's going pretty smoothly. So that is what's up for me. And Richard always has all the things going on, and he's always publishing.
No, I don't have much going on. I'm still in the throes of writing the end chapters of Windwalker. So the book is 150,000 words probably by the time it's done. And it just, I finally got through the tedious part where you're trying to string the beginning to the end. Like sometimes the middle chapters seem to just drag on for some reason, and at least for me anyway. But as I get near the end, all of a sudden, the storylines all start coming together, and the pace starts picking up, and it starts coming a lot quicker. So that's where the phase I'm in right now. So Windwalker, I'm hoping to release sometime this summer. That's really all the news for me. And so next week on Looking for Legends, we will be speaking with author Sarah Cadies. I hope I'm saying that right. Sarah writes eco-thrillers, and it'll be interesting to find out what that is. I think I know, but we're going to find out. And narrative nonfiction. Her writing is largely inspired by her previous careers as an archaeologist and Indigenous knowledge study lead, where she routinely lived in tents, caught rides in helicopters, and adored the landscapes around her. Sarah is a 2-time Energy Futures Lab Banff Summit storyteller. So Banff is a place in Canada. It's just on the British Columbia-Alberta border. She's a recipient of the Calgary Arts Development Individual Artist Grant and has presented at the British Society of Criminology conference on the application of using arts-based approaches. That'll be interesting about the criminology part. So for Christie, who we are so happy to have back with us again, and Dave, who sends his regrets tonight, and myself, we hope everyone has a safe and healthy week ahead. Until we meet again, take good care.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.